Last week, I received, as I'm sure many people, and possibly all residents in Wells, one piece of mail from Nestle. It was a marketing piece with a DVD. I listened and watched the DVD and learned what a wonderful corporate neighbor Nestle is to the communities where it is located. I thought it odd at the time that I received only one piece of marketing information, because before the vote on the rights-based ordinance a few months ago, I received 6 brochures within a week from Nestle. And then it dawned on me why I only received one. And I looked back and said, oh, Leslie, that's right. You did watch the Ordinance Review Committee meetings. And yes, representatives from Nestle were at those meetings and addressing the chairman of the board of the Ordinance Review Committee, inserting their own language into the town of Wells's proposed ordinance. Members of the Board of Selectmen, you've let the people of Wells down. The responsibility was impugned to you to ensure that all members and participants in the Ordinance Review Committee that drafted this ordinance were unbiased.
What is in it for the town of Wells to allow large-scale water extraction? And let's not kid ourselves. We're talking about large-scale water extraction by the Nestle Corporation. They've already attempted to have a contract with the KK&W. Wells essentially gets nothing if you allow large-scale water extraction. You do not have anything on your books to be able to gather royalties or taxes from each gallon extracted.
If the ordinance goes through, it allows large-scale water extraction. What compensation is there for Wells?
There's not.
There's no compensation.
No, there's not. It's not in
It's
the
off the
ordinance.
table.
It's on our powers to secure it. Unless I believe that there is a large-scale water extraction. It will either be through the KK&W and
Their contract is off the table, is that correct? Certainly.
Or it will be with a private landowner.
Is Nestle willing to assure our citizens and our local small businesses that they would not use international investment agreements to challenge any legal issue that could arise in Maine?
In particular, a regulatory ordinance such as we have here that provides a mechanism for reducing or eliminating the pumping from an aquifer if there were adverse consequences. And I just want to point out that without a regulatory ordinance like this, we have no protection other than the state DEP regulations. Keep that in mind as you vote on this. We would have no local protection.
I'm standing to suggest strongly that large water extraction ordinance should mandate continuous recorded monitoring by the town of Wells of the actual quality that's being pumped by the large water extraction organization. The minimum cost of such monitoring would be very easily covered by the organization that's pumping it, but at least you know what's happening.
Wells National Ice Stream Research Reserve, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you about this ordinance tonight. I do have some concerns about the ordinance, and most likely because on page 12, the section 1, the geological and hydrological standards, both A and B, the basis for this standard is based on the word unreasonable, or unreasonable changes in groundwater, or unreasonably negative impacts. And while I realize why that word is there, I think if you talk to people in this room, you would not get any agreement on what is unreasonable and unreasonable. And I think that sort of makes this ordinance a little bit untenable, particularly if any corporation that was going to come into town and do large-scale extractions would have considerable resources to debate that point. And again, I'd like to comment on the two people that spoke about the KK&W and their compliance with water flow. Both people were correct. KK&W has been out of compliance in the past, and the last few years they have been in compliance with flow. The difference was in 2001 to 2004 we had a drought, and since then we've had plenty of rain. Now, that's the difference. They are in compliance only because of adequate rainfall. In the 2003-2004 year, there was no flow over that Branch Brook Dam for I think 21 of the 31 days in August of that year, and that's their records. And no flow meant, for me at the reserve, no flow into the estuary, no mixing, no flushing. We're seeing increasing levels of bacteria in that river. Again, we kind of think that that's due to lack of flushing, low inflows in the summer. That's impacting our beaches. We're having difficulty with water quality on the beaches. And so again, getting that, is that unreasonable? Is that unreasonably effects by extracting more water? I don't know if you could say yes or no. It would take a tremendous amount of more scientific data, but I think that's what makes this ordinance a little bit untenable. That's unreasonable, and using that word, how are you going to come to an agreement on that? You can't. It's not a term that's defined. I understand why it's there, but to base your hydrological standards on that word seems to me to not work. That estuary already has high bacterial problems.
I am in favor of the proposed regulatory ordinance. It will preserve local control of our water resources. It will ensure we have constant monitoring and public disclosure. And in conjunction with the state's Natural Resource Protection Act, it will protect our groundwater resources and private wells. I think large-scale water extraction can provide an economic and profitable community investment. The town of Wells has written and enacted powerful ordinances in the past.
Took 4 of them that had Wells put it together. Wells is within the blue outline. If you look at that, the red and the yellow areas indicate known sand and gravel aquifers which hold water, and the yellow portions are known to produce at least 10 gallons per minute. The red portions are known to produce at least 70 gallons per minute. The rest of the white area is known to produce 10 gallons a minute or less. So in the white areas, that's where most people would assume that they'd end up having to drill down through bedrock to get water. So my main point of this map is that if you compare Wells to all the regions north of us and west, we really don't have as much of an abundance of water as they do in the sand and gravel aquifers. That one in the middle of Wells, that happens to follow right along Route 9 from the junction of 109 and 9 and 9. Follows 9 right down to Dodge Corner, so anybody on that business in that area there that might, if somebody started drilling in there, they might have problems. We have the Branch Brook, and you know that marks our northern border with kind of like that whole wiggly line along the top all the way from the down to the right. And the KKW is down toward the ocean, and then up in where the orange area is, where it starts to be a solid line in Sanford, that's where Nestle wants to go in. Wells certainly doesn't have a Saco River flowing in it. We don't have a miniature Sedago Lake in the middle of us collecting a whole lot of water, rainwater to Nestle. Of course, that doesn't keep Nestle from obtaining rights to pump from someone other than the water district and then attempting to obtain a permit. So 8 days after this letter, St. Germain started a study on the Branch Brook. And they came out with, they concluded that assuming certain conditions were met, that there would be negligible impact on the aquifer. Well, I took a look at their study, and I found some questions regarding some data points that they were using, and that study is the next page in your handout. And basically, the problem that I had was they use a figure of 4.4 million gallons per day for August. They talk about August because July and August are the worst days. And so they're assuming that the district's going after 4.4 million gallons. I went into the 2002 to 2007 annual reports of KKW, looked at their last chart, which is gallons pumped per month. And the next page of your handout charts that, and you'll see we're way above that 4.4 million. So if you take their figure where they say, okay, Nestle would only be going after 11% of what's left after KKW withdraws out of it in August, that figure really becomes 25.5%. And so withdrawal certificates are for 5 years and they're renewable. So basically it allows a utility to go ahead, keep pumping, which is reasonable, while they try to meet in-stream flows. But they aren't meeting in-stream flows and they've applied for this. That's a big point. So we know that Branch Brook is going to have not going to have adequate in-stream flows to support its ecosystem, but the town is proposing an ordinance that would most likely enable a company to come in and start pumping water from springs that feed directly into the brook. To me, that just doesn't make sense. First of all, we're not talking about, and it is Andy Fiss of the DEP talking about what the state's doing. This was last Friday at this commission, and you'll hear what he says about groundwater rights and international trade. Maine is starting to realize that it's possible that groundwater should be put in the public domain, and so it should be like put in the public trust like surface waters. Both New Hampshire and Vermont have recently enacted this sort of legislation, as have many other states.